As Netzarim believers, when you're discussing things with Christian friends, there's often difficult areas. And in fact, probably three main areas of difficulty which I just want to touch on. The first one, of course, is the concept that Christians and most people out there in the world have, that Israel is the Jewish people, and the Jewish people are Israel. Well, we know from Scripture, of course, that that's not true. And we know there's another whole group that are part of Israel, and yet they're not Jews. Because Scripture is full of terms like the house of Judah and the house of Israel, and a few places the house of Ephraim. And very clearly they speak of two different entities. This is further backed up, of course, by Yeshua's parables when he speaks about things like the Good Samaritan, the prodigal son, which are both about these two groups of Israel. Even more pertinent, of course, are parables like the 10 virgins, because 10 reflects the house of Israel, which was 10 tribes. Whenever Samaria comes up in Scripture, again, Samaria is pinpointing the house of Israel, since Samaria was the capital city of the house of Israel. Even more so when you read scriptures like the book of Ezekiel, where Ezekiel is told he is a watchman for the house of Israel. Very specific. Most people read that and think, yes, okay, he's a watchman for the Jews. No, he's not. He's a watchman for the house of Israel. The Jews are the house of Judah. So getting past this concept that Jews are Israel, Israel is Jews, can be very difficult for many of our Christian friends to grasp if we're talking to them. And yet, the truth is, Scripture says, two groups make up Israel. The Jews, the house of Judah, and non-Jews, but still Israelites, the house of Israel. Another great difficulty many of your Christian friends will have is the term replacement theology. It's not normally spoken of quite in those terms, but many of the church folk see the church as having replaced Israel. The promises that were once given to the Jews, as they would often say, are now inherited by the church. Our problem here is the concept of church as we have in our modern scriptures and our modern ideas. If we look at where this word church comes from, we find that from the Greek, which is in fact many cases where the New Testament, the Ketuvim HaNetzarim, has been translated from, has the word in it, ecclesia. Now, ecclesia ultimately has become the word church in Scripture. But where did the word ecclesia come from? Well, there is increasing evidence, in fact almost overwhelming evidence, that the New Testament, the Ketuvim HaNetzarim as we would call it, was originally written in either Hebrew or Aramaic. And the word, two words in fact, from those languages from which the word ecclesia has been translated, one of those is kelah, and of course in Hebrew, kelah has a very different meaning from ecclesia in Greek. The word kelah in Hebrew means a congregation or a gathering of Israel. The word ecclesia in Greek simply means a gathering of people. So we've lost the connection to Israel straight away. And of course, ultimately, we come into the word church. So we have a complete disconnection between what we think of as the church now and how it's attached to originally Israel. And hence this whole concept of replacement theology has come about, where people believe that the church is now the entity that Yahweh will use to bring about all his plans and purposes. Whereas in fact Scripture has never, ever, anywhere said that there's an entity, be it the church or any other entity, that has replaced the nation of Israel. Both parts, Jews and non-Jews. As far as Yahweh is concerned, these two groups will become unified, and this is the entity that he will work with to achieve his plans and purposes. You'll also have possibly some of your Christian friends start asking, oh, so all of this that you are starting to see as Netzarim, is this really important? Is it a salvation issue? Well, Shaul, or Paul as the church calls him, in Ephesians says, unless you are part of the commonwealth of Israel, you are without the Messiah, you are without the feasts and the covenant, and without hope. We also know Scripture says that teachers are going to be judged in a greater way than those who are not. And Yeshua backed this up too by saying that those who teach against the commandments will be least in the kingdom, and those who teach others to keep the commandments will be greatest in the kingdom. And he gave parables like the 10 virgins, and he quoted at one stage those who come to him having done all these things that people can see, like healing the sick and casting out demons and so on, and yet he says to them when they come to him, "Sorry, I didn't know you," even though they say, "Lord, Lord, look what we did." So all these things tell us that there are a greater thing to come into. Remember too, Yeshua said, "I didn't come to do away with the law," as it says in the King James or the Torah, but in fact, he came to show us how to correctly interpret it, which is what that word fulfill means in its concept idea in the Hebrew. So is it a salvation issue? We know people are only judged on what they know. So who's teaching them? They only know what they're taught. That's why teachers are going to be judged in a greater way. So you need to think about and choose, is this path a greater understanding of the kingdom and a greater relationship? Or are we simply going to stand on the starting blocks, which is what salvation is? There is far, far more that Yahweh has for us to inherit than simply standing on the starting blocks. Thank you.